Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. I am your host, Father Matthew Schneider, a priest of the Legionaries of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Christ Production Network at sqpn.com. Today is day 156. We are concluding perfectae caritatis with paragraphs 23 to 25 on conferences of religious and a conclusion to perfectae caritatis. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican. Yesterday and today, we each have three numbers each day that are kind of independent of each other. So yesterday we talked about 20, religious need to proper apostolate as missionaries. 21, how to deal with communities that are dying. 22, Federation of Independent Monasteries. Today we're going to deal with 23, set up in national conferences for religious superiors. 24, the whole church should encourage religious vocations. And 25, religious life is highly esteemed by the church and entrusted to Mary. So this ended up being a little longer in the kind of notes I added, so I'm going to get straight into paragraph 23. Let's read it. This synod favors conferences or councils of major superiors established by the Holy See. These contribute very much to achieve the purpose of each institute, to encourage more effective cooperation for the welfare of the Church, to ensure a more just distribution of the ministers of the gospel in a given area, and finally to conduct affairs in the interest of all religious. Suitable coordination and cooperation with episcopal conferences should be established with regard to the exercise of the apostolate. Similar conferences should be established for secular institutes. So, I think there's a few terms I need to get to before I talk about these conferences and what they do, first of all. So, major superiors here is a specific term. It means a superior who has a level of authority over the assignments of the members, not just their day-to-day life. For example, like in my community, I may have a superior, local superior, and he's the one I asked for, hey, I want to go, I want to go and listen to this talk tomorrow night, and so I'll miss night prayers. And he's like, okay, yeah, fine, that's a reasonable thing. Or, I need to buy some new pants or something, right? Those day-to-day things. But he can't say, hey, I want you to move to this other community, or I want you to change your apostolate completely from teaching at the seminary to doing something completely different, right? I don't know, being chaplain at our school or something, right? But for us, the provincial can. So it's the provincial for us. For monasteries, often the abbot or abbess. And then they're above the provincial, there's often a general. Now, having the levels of provincial and general generally depends on numbers. Smaller communities just have one level for that because they're such, right? And provincials cover a certain area, whereas generals cover the whole world. And the idea of the general area of the world is more about the numbers of members than specifically how geographically large it is. That's why, for example, there are more Dominican provinces in the U.S. than legionary provinces. Why? In the U.S. and Canada. Why? Because there are more Dominicans than there are legionaries, right? So it makes sense. The superior, you want the provincial to really know the members in a way, and a human being can usually only know like 150 people or so. The type of people who tend to be superiors are a little higher on that, but still getting a province over 200 gets a little difficult where the superior who's commanded doesn't really know all of the members of the territory. Now, that may not include all those information, things like that, but at least those out in apostolate, depending on how you run it, right? So that's the idea, right? And then there are most countries or regions have conferences, one for male, one for female, right? The idea here is to note with episcopal conferences, so often the area is the same as the episcopal conference. In the U.S., there's a unique situation where there are two for one. So the leadership conference of women religious was not really following what was laid out in this document as far as things like the habit. They also had issues like calling for priest ordination of females and things, of women and things like that. And so in the early 90s, the Vatican approved a second group called the Council of Major Superiors of Women Religious. And this is a very unique situation. I don't know of any other country that has two. The CMSWR, the second one, the Council of Major Superiors of Women Religious, has fewer members, about a fifth as many members, but it tends to have significantly more vocations per community than the Leadership Conference of Women Religious. So long term, it will probably end up more even, and possibly even the CMSWR becoming larger, right? Now, also, as a kind of side note here, the communities that have papal enclosure, like monasteries, often participate less in this because they're like, hey, we don't really leave the cloister, and this would be a good thing, but we're not going to, we're trying to live our life of prayer here. One of the things is now with a lot of things like Zoom and streaming for things like this, it really helps that those kind of communities, like the superior can just be at the meeting or just be at the kind of, a meeting with a bunch of other superiors of the similar communities, talk, meeting and talk and not really leave their cloister, not have to worry about all the worldliness of other places and things like that, which is a great thing with technology, right? So what are the purposes of these conferences, right? Cooperation between communities, working out where, certain apostles might go. We don't want 25 communities all just try and start a school in the same city at the same time. It's probably not a good plan. Things like that. Share best practices, right? Because I love the Legion. I'm a legionary. It's great, but we don't do everything the best. There's other communities who do certain aspects better than us, and I'd love to learn from them so that we can do better, right? And things like this, they can have a talk there, and it's like one community is doing something really good, can have a talk and help out the other communities, and serve the interests of the religious members and building the apostolates, right? And then it talks about secular institute, other forms of consecrated life, similar idea, right? So as we continue on here, paragraph 24 is talking about the whole local church to encourage vocations, right? And it has 3 paragraphs. So A, we'll read, and it encourages religious vocation in the parish, and B or C about religious promoting vocations, most of all through their example. So let's read A. Priests and Christian educators should make serious effort to foster religious vocations, thereby increasing the strength of the church, corresponding to its needs. These candidates should be suitably and carefully chosen. In ordinary preaching, the life of the evangelical councils and the religious stage should be treated more frequently. Parents, too, should nurture and protect religious vocation in their children by instilling Christian virtue in their hearts. So think back to your parish. Think back to the Catholic school, the kind of local church you have, right? Your local parish and school and things like that. When was the last time the preaching was about how wonderful religious life was? When was the last time young people were encouraged to follow religious life, right? This is something that the council is asking us. This is something that if we're going to be following this ecumenical council of the church, we should be promoting vocations in every single parish. Vocations to the priesthood for the diocese and vocations to religious life as well, right? And then also secular institutes, societies of apostolic life, etc., right? And so we have the duty, right? The priests do religious education, parents, all the different people kind of, running the parish and things like that have a duty to promote vocations. It's not just kind of like, oh, we leave it to the religious. No. Or we leave it to the priest. No. It's great when we see parents who are promoting, let's pray for vocations, or a parent who has a son or daughter who's in a religious community who comes and gives a talk after Mass some Sunday and says, hey, this is how wonderful it is that my son or daughter is in a religious community, right? Because that encourages people to think about a vocation like that. And obviously, there needs to be a selection. Obviously, not everybody who visits a religious community is going to become a member of that religious community. In fact, until about first vows, I don't think the majority continue on. So first vows is usually a year or two after you join. After novitiate, it can be a little longer depending on how long the postulancy candidacy pre-time is. Some communities have, by the time you enter novitiate, they have 50% or something like that. For us, it's about first vows. You have 50% who persevere and things like that. And no community has where if you visit, you're going to, even 50% of those who visit are going to have a vocation, right? So don't think I'm thinking about it. I'm going to go and visit the seminary. I'm going to go and visit this religious community. It's like, I'm going to have to join this community. No, that's just a minor little thing. There's the vast majority of those who visit our community on vocational trips are not members of our community, right? I would think the vast majority, especially if you go back 5-10 years and don't talk about people who just visited, are married with kids by this point, right? So that's the reality. Most Christians are called to marriage, but it's wonderful to promote religious vocations for those who are called to this vocation. So paragraphs B and C talk about religious should promote vocations, most of all through our example. So let's read it. B. Religious communities have the right to make themselves known in order to foster vocations and seek candidates. In doing this, however, they should observe the norms laid down by the Holy See and the local ordinary. C. Religious should remember there is no better way than their own example to commend their institutes and gain candidates for religious life. Right? So that's important there. A side note, somebody commented that I have to stop using right too much. I apologize. I will try and avoid using it so much. I know it's a kind of, it's a term that I started listening to it and I'm like, yes, I use the term right a bunch. Anyways, so I will try to avoid that. I'm not going to be perfect probably. So let's continue. A summary here of 24B and C. Religious not only have the right, but the duty to promote vocation to our community, right? we have this duty to promote it. How is this community going to survive? How are we going to have more people following this charism? How are we going to save souls in the future, right? Vocations. Now, obviously, certain communities have reached that point of no return we talked about yesterday, and those communities would not be promoting vocations their own community, but even members of those communities should be promoting vocations in general, right? And they seek out members who follow their charism, right? See, there we go. I shouldn't say right. Seek out members who follow their charism. For example, I personally have told more than one guy who I was talking to about a vocation that the Legion probably wasn't for them. And the biggest thing is usually that they seem to be very focused on, we need to reform the church in this city, this city, this city. And if that's the vocation you're feeling called to, join the diocese, join a monastery that has a vow of stability, so you will always be in that area. Don't join a community where you're going to be likely sent all around the country, because that doesn't seem to be where your heart is. Your heart is set on this place. And my community, Legions of Christ, you're not set on like this particular person back home in their own home diocese. There are some legionaries who work back in their home diocese, but it's definitely the minority of legionaries. Now we need to follow the norms of the diocese and the Holy See. For example, we don't go and poach vocations. We don't go and try and grab vocation people who are already following some other vocation in the church. I know my role in the seminary. I'm not there to promote, hey, join the Legion, right? They're all the men who are in the seminary. They've already signed up with a diocese or signed up with another community. And so it would be against the spirit of the church, and I think against the norms, for me to say, hey, like, come and join the Legion, right? Now, that's not the idea. But I'm there to help them become great priests, so then maybe when they go out, they promote vocations, and one of the guys they promote vocations with, who's 18, 20 years old, starts thinking about the Legion or something. That would be great. And it's all important to work with the diocese, not in opposition. It's great when I see religious kind of as this assistant vocation director. Some dioceses have this where they have a diocesan priest as the general vocation director and focus on diocesan vocation, the diocesan priesthood. And then they have a religious sister or brother or religious priest focused on religious vocations. That's great to see because that really shows that cooperation. Now, the other thing is that paragraph C talks about our example is the best promotion, right? I hope that things like this help and encourage young men to think about the legionaries, right? I'm not here, gotta stop saying right. I'm not here to primarily use this as a means of promoting vocation. My primary goal is that people who are going to Mass every Sunday want to know a little more, learn a little more about their faith by listening to this podcast. And in hopefully doing that, I hope that maybe one or two of those guys who are younger, who are thinking about a vocation might think, oh, maybe I'll contact the Legion because this is an attractive thing to think about the legionaries. If this is you, frmatthewlc.com has a contact form, and it just goes straight to my email. It doesn't go to anybody else, and we can keep whatever you're talking about at this moment confidential. Obviously, if you're going to join in the summer or something like that, that can't really be kept confidential in the same way that a few emails and phone calls can be. And I think that is a great way of, promoting vocations through our own life, right? So many young men looked at some priest, some religious, and they're like, hey, this is what I want to do. And so they follow the vocation, thinking of that particular person. So let's go to our final paragraph of perfectae caritatis, our final paragraph today, paragraph 25, religious life is highly esteemed by the church and entrusted to Mary. This is kind of a conclusion paragraph that even the sentences are kind of disparate and not super united as a single paragraph. So let's read it. Religious institutes for whom these norms of adaptation and renewal have been laid down should respond generously to the specific vocation God gave them as well as their work in the church today. The Sacred Synod highly esteems their way of life in poverty, chastity, and obedience, of which Christ the Lord is himself the exemplar. Moreover, their apostolate, most effective, whether obscure or well-known, offers the Synod great hope for the future. Let all religious, therefore, rooted in faith and filled with love for God and neighbor, love of the cross and hope for future glory, spread the good news of Christ throughout the whole world, so that their witness may be seen by all and our Father in heaven may be glorified. Matthew 5. Therefore, let them seize the Virgin Mary, the gentle Mother of God, whose life is the model for all, that their number may daily increase and their salutary works be more effective. Right, so this is important. All of us religious need to respond generously to what the council asks. Unfortunately, what happened is we had the opposite. Generosity implies, I give myself for Christ, I give myself for souls, I give myself for others, bring them about, right? But What do we see in the Spirit? We often saw a self-centeredness, a lack of generosity when we talked about the Spirit of Vatican II, when we talked about religious life. It's trying to, be comfortable, be nice, be easy. No, we are called to sacrifice ourselves for others. Religious life is the cross. If you want a comfortable life, don't join a religious community. You have a secure life that, yes, but you make vows of poverty, chastity, obedience, final vows, you are guaranteed for life. But it's not going to be this comfortable life, just maxing, relaxing out on the beach or something. No, that is not what we are called to do as religious. We are called to give ourselves continually, day by day, hour by hour, for the salvation of souls, for the glorification of Christ's kingdom. Next, we talk about how the council seems religious. The vow is helpful for the whole church. This example of that and things like that. It's great to see all this, and that is wonderful. And we need to live with faith. It's living this cross, right? We give ourselves to Jesus. We give ourselves to others. We need to live this cross. Religious life, priesthood, is a cross. Now, obviously, marriage is a cross too, but it's a different type of cross. And finally, this document, like a lot of documents of the church, ends with Mary. We entrust ourselves to the gentle Mother of God. We entrust ourselves to the Blessed Virgin. And we ask her to help us with vocations, help us to live the spirit of our community, help us to be faithful religious like we are called to be. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast that you can donate to help StarQuest produce it, another great podcast at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we are going to move on to Obtatum Totius on priestly formation, and we're going to start with an interview with Father Mark Doherty of St. Patrick's Seminary in the San Francisco Bay Area. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which provides a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information, like a reading plan and playlist and individual documents, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X. We also have an email for questions and comments at Vatican2@sqpn.com, or my website, frmatthewlc.com, has a contact form.